This happened a few years ago, back when I was in college. To earn money for tuition, I took a night shift job at a place called Guardian Self-Storage. The work was simple, even boring. I just had to sit in a small office, monitor a dozen CCTV screens, and do a patrol every few hours to make sure all those identical, cold metal roll-up doors were securely locked. During the day, the place had some life to it, with people coming and going, moving the things they couldn't currently fit in their lives. But at night, especially at 2 a.m., the entire facility felt like a massive tomb made of metal and concrete. The only sounds were the monotonous hum of the fluorescent lights and the audio from whatever Netflix show was playing on my old laptop. That particular night started no differently than the hundreds before it. A light rain was falling outside, the drops tapping a steady rhythm on the office roof. I was sipping instant coffee that tasted like muddy water, half watching a documentary. Around 1:45 a.m., I glanced at the system log for the main gate. The electronic access system recorded the time and corresponding unit number for every key card entry. That's when I saw the first strange thing. The log showed that a customer had swiped in 5 minutes earlier for C block. But I had been staring right at the monitors, and the camera for the C block entrance was completely empty. I rewound the footage and watched it again carefully. Nothing. No car, no person, not even a stray cat. I frowned, assuming it was just a minor system glitch. Old electronic equipment like that could be finicky. I didn't think much of it and went back to my documentary. At 3 a.m., it was time for my routine patrol. I grabbed the heavy mag light and stepped out of the office. The cold, damp air made me shiver. The rows of corridors in the storage facility were long and straight, and my footsteps echoed in the silence, sounding hollow and lonely. I followed my usual route, walking through A block and B block. Everything was normal. But when I entered the long corridor of C block, my heart skipped a beat. The ground was dry, protected by the overhead roof, but right in the middle of the hallway was a single, clear, wet and muddy footprint. Just one. It was just there, isolated, as if someone had dropped from the ceiling and then vanished. I shone my flashlight on it. It was the print of a boot with a deep tread. My shoes were flat-soled sneakers. I swallowed hard, a feeling of unease beginning to creep up my spine like a vine. I followed the direction the print was pointing. At the end of the hall was Storage Unit C, 137. I walked toward it slowly, the beam of my flashlight dancing across the metal door. It was properly secured with the standard-issue disc lock. I pressed my ear against the cold metal, holding my breath. There was no sound from within. I felt a bit paranoid. Maybe a customer had left it during the day, and the cleaning crew missed it. I tried to reassure myself with this thought, but I found myself walking faster, almost jogging, back to the office, where I immediately locked the door behind me. Back at the monitors, my eyes were glued to every camera in C block. My heart was pounding in my chest. A few minutes later, on the camera at the far end of the C block corridor, a shadow flickered. It was too fast, like a bad frame in the video feed. I instantly rewound it and played it back frame by frame. There it was. In front of Unit C, 137, a tall figure leaned out from the shadow of the door, looked directly up at the camera, and then pulled back. He was wearing a dark hoodie, his face hidden in the shadows, but I could feel it. He was looking at me. He knew I was in the office. Fear washed over me like a bucket of ice water. I immediately reached for the phone to call the police. But the moment I picked up the receiver, all the lights in the office went out with a loud pop. The monitor screens turned black. A power outage. A dead silence enveloped me, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I dropped the phone, fumbled for the small plastic backup flashlight in my desk drawer, and scrambled underneath the desk, my entire body numb. Then I heard it. A sound from outside the office, very faint. The scrape of a shoe on concrete. He was coming. I covered my mouth, trying not to make a sound. The footsteps stopped right outside my office door. Through the gap under the desk, I could see a shadow fall across the floor beneath the door. He was right there. Time stretched on, each second feeling like a century. Suddenly there was a click. It was the sound of the doorknob turning. My heart nearly jumped out of my throat. Thankfully, I had locked it. He twisted it, but it didn't open. I thought he might give up, or maybe try to pry the door open. He did neither. He just stood there, waiting silently. Then I heard a sound that will haunt me forever, the swipe of a key card through the reader. Beep failed. The system's electronic voice was piercing in the silence. How did he have a key card? He swiped it again. Beep failed. My mind went blank. This wasn't a random intruder. This was planned. He must have been watching me, knew the systems. That card he had, it might be close to working. Just as I was about to pass out from sheer terror, a deafening noise made my ears ring. Crack! The small, reinforced glass window on the office door exploded inward. A hand in a black glove reached through the hole, fumbling, trying to get to the interior doorknob. In that instant, primal survival instinct took over. I screamed, crawled out from under the desk, and with all my strength, shoved the heavy desk against the door. Then I turned and ran for the emergency exit on the other side of the office, slammed it open, and burst out into the cold, rainy night. I didn't look back. I just ran. I didn't know if he was chasing me. I sprinted out of the main gate of the storage facility and onto the road, waving my arms frantically. A passing truck screeched to a halt, the driver leaning out and yelling at me. I was crying, incoherently begging him to call the police. The police came. They found the office door barricaded, the glass shattered. They found Unit C, 137 pried open. But the most terrifying discovery was what they found inside that unit. There was no furniture, no boxes. Just a sleeping bag, some empty food wrappers, and a small camp stove. And pinned to the wall were dozens of photos of me. There were photos of me dozing off at the desk, of me on my phone during patrols, and even a few of me parking my car outside my own apartment building. He hadn't just shown up tonight. He had been living there for a long time, right behind one of those cold metal doors, watching me like a spider, just waiting. The police never found him. I quit my job the next day and moved soon after. But to this day, I still double-check the locks on my door before I go to sleep. I can never forget that silent night, or the bone-deep chill of realizing I had been hunted. I don't know what he wanted, or why he chose me. That unknown is more terrifying than any danger I can name. Years ago, I worked the night shift at a 24-hour supermarket chain. It was an old store in the suburbs, with not many residential areas around, mainly serving long-haul truck drivers at night. I usually covered from midnight to 8 in the morning. Besides me, there was only Mary, the cashier, who mostly dozed off at the counter. That night was like any other. Around 3 in the morning, the store was empty. It was drizzling outside, and I was restocking snacks in the aisles when I suddenly heard a bang from the cashier area. I thought Mary had knocked something over again, but then came a distinct click. I walked to the cashier, and Mary was fast asleep, completely undisturbed. I looked around and saw nothing, except for the display stand for promotional posters, which had toppled over onto the floor, with the poster lying beside it. I thought maybe it was just the wind, or I had heard wrong. I went back to the aisles and continued my work. About 10 minutes later, I felt something was off with the store lights, as if they were a bit dimmer than usual. I looked up, and most of the light tubes seemed to be working fine. When I lowered my head again, my peripheral vision caught an emergency exit sign at the end of an aisle. It was usually green, but now it was flickering with a faint red glow in the dimness. My heart sank. That thing never lit up normally. I hurried over. The sign was indeed flickering, and a fire door next to it, which I remembered locking during my afternoon check, was slightly ajar. Beyond the door was the back alley, filled with junk, a place even flies usually avoided. A shiver ran down my spine. I quickly closed and locked the door, checking it several times. I tried to convince myself that perhaps Mary had forgotten to lock it when she went out to throw trash during her break. I returned to the cashier area, intending to talk to Mary about it, but she wasn't at her post. A strong sense of unease washed over me. I called out a few times, but there was no response. Just then, I heard a faint rustling sound from deep within the aisles, like someone whispering. The sound was very soft, with a strange, viscous quality, and I couldn't make out what was being said, but it definitely wasn't Mary's voice. The hairs on my arms stood on end. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the store besides Mary and me. I picked up the walkie-talkie, my palms sweating, and whispered, "Mary? Where are you?" Only static came from the device. The sound continued, and it seemed to be slowly approaching my direction. I froze, staring at the dark aisle ahead, my heart pounding. Just as I was about to break down, a dark shadow suddenly darted through the gap in the shelves. It wasn't Mary's short, stout figure, but a tall, slender silhouette. He moved quickly with a chilling, premeditated calm. I didn't even catch a glimpse of his face, only felt a cold draft brush past my cheek. I instinctively stepped back, bumping into a display stand behind me, sending snacks clattering to the floor. I felt him right in front of me. The silent pressure was more suffocating than any sound. I could even smell a faint, damp earthiness. I spun around abruptly and ran towards the store in trance with all my might. I burst to the entrance, only to find the rolling shutter door pulled down most of the way, leaving only a narrow gap. It was raining outside, and the street lights illuminated the wet ground, but there wasn't a soul around. I desperately tried to pull the shutter up, but my hands were shaking too much to get a grip. Just then, I felt something closing in behind me, an icy, sickening presence enveloping me. I didn't even have time to scream before a hand suddenly reached out from behind, clamping over my mouth, while the other hand tightly wrapped around my neck. I began to struggle, kicking and flailing desperately, but the person's strength was terrifying. I felt my neck being crushed, my breath growing short, and my vision blurring. I didn't know who this person was or what they wanted to do. I just knew I was dying. Just as I was losing consciousness, I suddenly heard police sirens outside. The hand on my neck released its grip, and I fell heavily to the floor, coughing violently. When I looked up, the dark figure was gone. A police car pulled up to the store entrance, and several officers rushed in, finding me curled up on the floor, gasping for air. They said a passing driver had called it in, seeing the store's rolling shutter, not fully closed, and a flickering light inside, which seemed suspicious. I was taken to the hospital, and besides the marks on my neck and some scrapes, I was physically unharmed. I never went back to that supermarket for the night shift again. Mary was later found in a box in the storage room. She was terrified but otherwise unharmed. The police launched an investigation, but the store's surveillance footage had been tampered with, leaving only blurry static. The police said it was likely an attempted robbery, interrupted by the passing driver. But I knew it wasn't just a robbery. That dark figure hadn't taken anything, and his actions didn't follow the logic of a robber. I don't know who he was or what he wanted to do to me, but I vividly remember his eyes, gleaming in the darkness, and that cold, deadly pressure. Even now, whenever night falls, I instinctively lock all the doors and windows, and then meticulously check every corner, terrified that something or someone might silently appear behind me again. Night shifts were usually my salvation, not because I enjoyed being away from my family, but because the highway at 3 in the morning was an entirely different beast. No traffic, no horns, just the hum of my diesel engine and the low thrum of music on my radio. I'm a truck driver, and I'd been running the Portland to Reno route for 5 years, twice a week. It was a lonely stretch, but that loneliness had always been predictable, comforting. Until that night. I'd left Portland a few hours later than usual that evening. My rig had a minor issue, and by the time it was sorted, it was well past midnight. The sky was inky, darker than usual, and there was a fine, chilling rain falling, accompanied by a stiff breeze. As I merged onto I-5, I was practically the only vehicle on the road. About an hour south of Eugene, I felt a sudden, violent lurch in the rig, and the steering wheel started to fight me. A blowout. I wrestled the truck to the shoulder, pulling over in a desolate stretch with no streetlights. I flipped on my hazard lights and got out to inspect the damage. Sure enough, the rear right tire was flat, and in the beam of my flashlight, I saw a massive steel spike, driven deep into the sidewall. I cursed under my breath. Out here, I'd be lucky to even get a cell signal. I pulled out my phone, and just as I suspected, the signal was patchy at best. After several tries, I finally managed to dial roadside assistance. I rattled off my location, my voice tight with urgency, and then waited, my anxiety mounting with every passing second. The rain was picking up, the wind howling, and I pulled my jacket tighter, staring out at the inky black highway. In this isolated area, passing cars were rare enough, let alone a tow truck. About 20 minutes later, a set of headlights appeared in the distance, growing steadily closer. It was an old pickup truck with an orange warning light flashing on its roof. A wave of relief washed over me. As the truck pulled up, two figures emerged. They wore dark hoodies, pulled low, almost obscuring their faces. One was tall and bulky, the other shorter and leaner. There were no company logos or uniforms on their clothes, nothing to identify them as legitimate roadside assistants. The taller one held a flashlight, sweeping it across my truck, and asked in a low, raspy voice, "Is this your rig that's broken down?" His voice was gravelly, carrying an unsettling, unidentifiable quality. I confirmed it was, pointing to the blown-out tire. The shorter man silently walked over to the tire, squatting down to examine it. My internal alarm bells began to clang. This felt wrong. Very wrong. Regular rescue personnel wouldn't be dressed like this, nor would they be so quiet. A shiver ran down my spine. The tall man suddenly strode toward me, his hands in his pockets, his eyes, barely visible under his hood, fixated on me. He wasn't looking at the tire. He was studying me, an unsettling appraisal that made my skin crawl. The shorter man stood up and in a strange, drawling voice said, "This is gonna cost you a pretty penny, buddy. That spike's in deep." I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's fine, just get the spare on for now. Money's not an issue." The tall man suddenly grinned, revealing a mouthful of yellowed teeth. There was no warmth in his smile. "Money's never an issue. We know you got plenty." As his words hung in the air, the shorter man suddenly pulled a glinting knife from his pocket and lunged at me. I had barely a second to react. I instinctively threw up my arm to block, feeling a searing pain as the blade grazed my forearm. I cried out, kicking out hard, and spun, bolting for the other side of my truck. I heard the tall man curse behind me, followed by rapid footsteps. I scrambled for the driver's side door, fumbling with the handle, then yanked it open and leaped inside, locking the door behind me. I jammed the key in the ignition and floored the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, and I heard shouts of frustration from outside. In my rearview mirror, I saw the two figures like two enraged beasts, flailing in my wake. I didn't look back, speeding away from that cursed, desolate stretch of highway as fast as the rig could go. It wasn't until I'd driven dozens of miles and pulled into a brightly lit service station that my heart began to slow. I checked the gash on my arm. Blood had already soaked through my shirt. I called 911, and the police arrived quickly. They took my statement and sent officers to investigate the scene. They told me that these kinds of incidents, disguised as roadside assistance, weren't uncommon, especially on isolated stretches of road. They advised me to be careful and suggested I install a dash cam. From that night on, every time I drive that route, every time it rains, I grip the steering wheel tighter, my eyes glued to my rearview mirror. I survived, but I know they're still out there, waiting for the next rainy night, waiting for the next unsuspecting truck driver.